I woke up to a sentence no mother should ever hear. Your daughter stopped by earlier, the nurse said. Her voice was gentle. Calm. Professional. But the next sentence didn't sound gentle at all. She said she needed your car keys. But before we continue. My brain was still foggy from anesthesia, so for a moment the words didn't land properly. Car keys? Why would Lena need my car keys? I blinked slowly at the hospital ceiling lights, trying to focus. The surgery had taken nearly 4 hours. At least that's what the surgeon had told me beforehand. Gallbladder removal. Routine, he said. Nothing to worry about. But waking up felt strange. Heavy. Slow. Like my thoughts were moving through syrup. The nurse adjusted the blanket over my legs. Your daughter seemed in a hurry, she continued casually. She said you'd already discussed selling the car. That's when my heart skipped. Selling the car? I turned my head slowly toward her. What did you say? The nurse hesitated, suddenly unsure. Oh. I assumed you knew, she said. She said you told her she could handle it while you were in surgery. I felt the anesthesia fog vanish instantly. Handle it? My daughter Lena was 38 years old. Impulsive. Emotional. But she had never done anything like that before. At least not this brazenly. I swallowed. When did she leave? I asked. The nurse checked the chart. About 3 hours ago. 3 hours. That meant the car was already gone. Sold. Transferred. Somewhere far away from the hospital parking lot where I'd left it that morning. A strange silence settled in the room. The nurse seemed to sense something was wrong. You didn't authorize it? She asked quietly. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stared at the ceiling again. My mind was moving faster now. Replaying things. Looking for clues. And then a memory surfaced. A small one. A quiet detail that suddenly felt enormous. Something sitting in the glove box. Something I had placed there 2 weeks ago and completely forgotten about until this moment. My stomach tightened. Not because the car was gone. Cars can be replaced. But what was inside that glove compartment? That was another matter entirely. I closed my eyes. And for a moment, I just breathed. Because Lena didn't know about that. She couldn't. No one did. Which meant when she sold the car. She sold something else too. Something she absolutely should not have touched. Let me ask you something. If you woke up from surgery and discovered your own child had sold your car while you were unconscious, what would your first reaction be? Anger? Panic? Disbelief? For me, it wasn't any of those. It was realization. Because Lena had been acting strange for months. Little things at first. Questions about my finances. Comments about how expensive my car looked. Jokes about how I didn't drive enough to justify owning it. At the time, I brushed it off. But lying there in that hospital bed, everything suddenly connected. Lena and her husband Derek were drowning in debt. I knew that much. Derek's real estate business had collapsed the previous year. The housing market had shifted, commissions dried up, and suddenly they were living on credit cards and hope. They never asked me directly for money. But the hints were constant. You're lucky you paid off your house early. Your retirement must be comfortable. That Lexus probably holds its value well. Little comments. Small fishing lines dropped into the water. And now this. Selling my car while I was unconscious. Bold. Desperate. Or both. The nurse cleared her throat softly. Do you want me to call her? She asked. I shook my head slowly. No. Because right now I wasn't ready for that conversation. Not yet. First I needed to confirm something. Something that had suddenly become very important. What kind of car was it? The nurse asked gently, trying to fill the silence. A Lexus RX, I said. 3 years old. She nodded. That's a valuable car. Yes. Yes, it was. But again, the car itself wasn't the problem. The problem was what Lena might discover once the buyer opened that glove compartment. Or worse. What would happen if someone else discovered it first? The hospital room was quiet for several minutes. Machines hummed softly beside the bed. Footsteps echoed faintly in the hallway. Then suddenly the phone on the bedside table rang. The nurse picked it up. "Recovery room," she said. A pause. Then she covered the receiver with her hand. "It's your daughter." "Of course it is," I thought. The nurse handed me the phone. I pressed it slowly against my ear. Before I could say a word, Lena's voice exploded through the line. She wasn't calm. She wasn't polite. She was screaming. "Why did you leave that in the car?" The room went silent. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I closed my eyes again. Because now I knew. Lena had opened the glove box. And whatever she found inside had terrified her enough to call the hospital in a panic. But the truth was, she still didn't understand the full picture. Not yet. And what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What exactly did Lena find in that glove box that made her scream like that? That was the question hanging in the hospital room as her voice blasted through the phone. "Why did you leave that in the car?" Her words echoed so loudly the nurse glanced over from the medication cart. I stayed quiet. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because silence can be very revealing. When you say nothing, people start talking. And Lena did exactly that. "You knew I was going to sell it," she snapped. That statement alone told me something important. Lena wasn't even pretending anymore. No apology. No hesitation. Just accusation. I spoke slowly, my voice still rough from anesthesia. "Lena, what exactly did you find?" There was a pause. Not long. But long enough to hear her breathing. Fast. Panicked. "Don't do that," she said. "Don't act like you don't know." Interesting. Very interesting. Because the truth was, I did know. But I wanted to hear what she thought she knew. And there's a difference. You see, 2 weeks before my surgery I had placed 3 things inside that glove box. Not by accident. By design. And none of them were things you'd expect to find in a car. The first was a sealed envelope labeled emergency legal documents. The second was a small flash drive. The third was a thin folder containing copies of financial records. On their own, those items wouldn't mean much. But together? They told a very specific story. A story about money disappearing. A story about trust breaking. A story about someone very close to me making decisions behind my back. But Lena didn't know that yet. Not the whole story. "All I asked you to do," Lena continued angrily, "was help me out for once." Help her out. That phrase almost made me laugh. "Help you out by selling my car while I was unconscious?" I asked calmly. "You weren't using it," she shot back instantly. "You're in the hospital. And you needed $32,000 today?" I asked. Silence. A long one. Because now we were getting closer to the truth. You see, Lena had always believed something about me that wasn't entirely accurate. She thought I was naive. Soft. A retired school principal who spent her days gardening and attending book club. She didn't realize something. When you spend 40 years managing teachers, parents, budgets, and school boards, you develop a certain instinct for dishonesty. And over the past 6 months, my instincts had been screaming. Money was disappearing. Small transfers at first. $200 here. $500 there. Amounts small enough to overlook. Until they weren't. At first I thought it was identity theft. Then one afternoon I noticed something strange. One of the transfers had originated from a device logged into my banking account. A device connected to Lena's IP address. That was the moment everything changed. But I didn't confront her. Not immediately. Instead I started watching. Listening. Recording. Which brings us back to the glove box. Mom, Lena said suddenly, her voice dropping lower. You need to tell me right now, who else has seen that stuff? There it was. Fear. Real fear. And that meant one thing. She had opened the envelope. Seen what? I asked softly. The recordings, she said. The word hung in the air. The nurse pretended not to listen. But I could see her ears tilt slightly. The flash drive, Lena continued nervously. Why would you keep recordings like that in your car? Because I needed copies somewhere outside the house. That was the real answer. But I didn't say it. Instead I asked a different question. Where's the car now? Lena hesitated again. I sold it. Yes, you mentioned that. To a dealership, she said quickly. Victor something. Victor Salgado. Victor Salgado. That name mattered. Because used car dealers do something almost immediately after buying a vehicle. They inspect it. Every compartment. Every pocket. Every hidden space. Which meant there was a very good chance Victor Salgado had already opened that glove box. And if he had, he would have found the envelope. The flash drive. The financial records. The recordings. All neatly organized. All labeled. All very easy to understand. Did you open the envelope before you sold it? I asked quietly. Yes, Lena snapped. And you should explain why you were recording me. Ah. So she heard them. At least some of them. The recordings were simple conversations. Mother and daughter talking in my kitchen. But they weren't normal conversations. They were conversations where Lena accidentally revealed things. Bank transfers. Passwords. Excuses. Moments she probably thought I wasn't paying attention. But microphones don't forget details. You were spying on me, Lena accused. No, I replied calmly. I was protecting myself. Another long silence followed. Then she said something that made my stomach tighten. Do you know how illegal that is? Illegal. Interesting choice of word. Because right now the only illegal act I could clearly see was selling someone else's car. Without permission. Without title. Without authorization. And leaving a paper trail while doing it. Lena, I said carefully. Did the dealer open the glove box? The silence that followed told me everything. Because she didn't answer. Instead she whispered something under her breath. Oh my God. Exactly. Oh my God. Because now she realized something. She sold the car without checking what was inside first. Which meant someone else now had the evidence. And that someone might already be looking at it. You need to call him, Lena said suddenly. Call who? The dealer. Her voice was frantic now. Tell him it was a mistake. Tell him it was a mistake. I almost admired the desperation. But some mistakes don't rewind. And some evidence doesn't disappear. Lena, I said slowly. I think it's too late for that. What do you mean too late? She demanded. But before I could answer, the nurse touched my arm. Ma'am, she whispered. There's a man at the front desk asking for you. A man? She nodded. He says his name is Victor Salgado. The room went very still. Because that meant one thing. Victor had already seen what was inside the glove box. And whatever he found was serious enough to drive to a hospital. But what Victor was about to reveal would make Lena's situation far worse than she imagined. Why would a car dealer drive all the way to a hospital just to talk to the owner of a car he had already bought? That question was sitting in my mind the moment the nurse said the name. Victor Salgado. I could still hear Lena breathing on the other end of the phone. Fast. Sharp. The kind of breathing people make when panic is slowly turning into dread. Mom, she said quietly now, the anger gone from her voice, replaced with something else. Don't talk to him. That alone told me everything I needed to know. When someone tells you not to talk to another person, it usually means they're afraid of what that conversation might reveal. Why not? I asked calmly. You just shouldn't, she said quickly. Just tell him there was a misunderstanding and you'll call him later. A misunderstanding. That word again. But this wasn't confusion. This was cause and effect. You sold the car, I said. You told him it was yours to sell. Yes, but. And now he has questions. Lena didn't answer. Instead she whispered something so softly I almost missed it. Did he see everything? That was the real question, wasn't it? Did Victor Salgado open the envelope? Did he plug in the flash drive? Did he read the financial records? Because if he had, he would immediately realize two things. First, the woman who sold the car might not have had the legal authority to do so. Second, the documents inside suggested something much bigger than a simple car sale. Lena, I said quietly, what exactly are you worried he saw? Her silence stretched for nearly 10 seconds. Then she said something that confirmed my worst suspicions. The bank transfers. There it was. Finally spoken out loud. Not an accident. Not a misunderstanding. Transfers. Plural. Which transfers? I asked. But she didn't answer. Instead she switched tactics. You had no right to record those conversations, she said quickly. Interesting how people redirect conversations when the truth gets close. You're avoiding my question, I said. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. Another pause. Then she exhaled hard. You left documents in a car, she said. That's irresponsible. Selling someone else's car is irresponsible too, I replied. That line seemed to hit something. Because Lena suddenly raised her voice again. You're acting like this is all my fault. The nurse looked over again. I lowered my voice. Whose fault do you think it is? You knew we were struggling, she snapped. There it was. The justification. The emotional argument. The idea that desperation somehow turns theft into something understandable. You never helped us, she continued. I helped you plenty, I said quietly. Which was true. Over the years I had paid for Lena's college tuition. Helped with the down payment on their first home. Even covered several months of mortgage payments when Derek's real estate commission slowed down. But there's a difference between helping someone and becoming their emergency bank account. And somewhere along the way, Lena stopped seeing the difference. $32,000 would solve a lot of problems, she said suddenly. The number hung in the air. So that's what Victor paid her. Not a bad deal for a car that didn't belong to her. But again, the money wasn't the real issue. What did you think would happen when I woke up? I asked. You were supposed to understand, she said quickly. Understand. That word again. Like betrayal becomes acceptable if you explain it confidently enough. Before I could respond, the nurse stepped closer to the bed. The gentleman is still waiting, she said quietly. Should I send him away? Lena reacted instantly. Yes. Her voice exploded through the phone. Yes, send him away. I almost smiled. Because desperation reveals more than confession. No, I told the nurse. You can let him come up. The panic on the phone was immediate. Mom, don't. Why not? You don't know what he's going to say. Exactly. And that's why I wanted to hear it. Because whatever Victor Salgado had discovered inside that glove box was serious enough for him to come here personally. People don't drive across town to hospitals over small issues. Mom, Lena said, her voice shaking now, please just tell him it was a mistake. But before I could answer, I heard a knock on the hospital door. 3 calm, deliberate knocks. The nurse opened it. And a tall man in a navy jacket stepped inside. Mid-50s. Calm posture. The kind of calm that usually means someone is used to handling problems. Mrs. Ellis? He asked politely. Yes, I said. My name is Victor Salgado. His voice was steady. Professional. But there was a seriousness in his eyes that told me this wasn't a casual visit. I believe your daughter sold me your car earlier today. The phone was still pressed against my ear. Lena was completely silent now. Listening. Waiting. Yes, I said slowly. That's what I've been told. Victor nodded once. I'm sorry to bother you while you're recovering from surgery, he said. But I felt this situation needed to be addressed immediately. The room felt smaller suddenly. Like the walls had moved a little closer. And why is that? I asked. Victor reached into a slim leather folder he was carrying. Then he placed something gently on the hospital bedside table. The sealed envelope. The same envelope that had been inside the glove box. Emergency legal documents. Lena inhaled sharply through the phone. So you did find them, I said quietly. Victor nodded. Yes. Then he reached into the folder again. And placed the flash drive beside the envelope. And these, he said. The nurse glanced at the items. Even she could sense something serious was unfolding. What exactly is this about? Victor asked carefully. I looked at the envelope. Then the flash drive. Then the phone in my hand. Because Lena was still listening. Still breathing softly. Still hoping this could somehow be fixed. But some moments closed doors permanently. And this was one of them. Mr. Salgado, I said slowly. Before I answer that. I paused. Then I asked the one question that mattered most. Did anyone else see those files? Victor's expression shifted slightly. Yes, he said. I showed them to someone. The silence in the room deepened instantly. Because if someone else had already seen those documents, then this situation had just moved far beyond a family argument. And Victor's next sentence confirmed it. I showed them to a detective. Why would a detective need to see what was inside my glove box? That question hung in the hospital room like a thick cloud. Victor Salgado stood beside the bed, calm but serious. The envelope and flash drive were resting quietly on the table between us. And on the phone pressed to my ear. My daughter had stopped breathing. Not literally. But the silence on her end had become so deep it felt like the air had disappeared. A detective? I repeated slowly. Victor nodded. Yes, ma'am. He pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, he continued, but when I opened the glove compartment and saw the documents, something didn't feel right. That was understandable. Most glove boxes contain insurance papers. Maybe a few napkins. Old parking tickets. They do not usually contain labeled envelopes titled emergency legal documents. They definitely don't contain flash drives with recorded conversations. Mr. Salgado, I said carefully, what exactly did you look at? Victor didn't hesitate. The envelope first. Of course he did. Curiosity is a powerful thing. And then? I asked. I read the notarized document inside. My stomach tightened slightly. That document mattered. A lot. What document? Lena suddenly blurted through the phone. She couldn't stay quiet anymore. Victor glanced at the phone in my hand. Is that your daughter? He asked. Yes, I said. He gave a small nod. That may simplify things. Simplify. That was an interesting word. Mr. Salgado, Lena said quickly, her voice trying to sound confident again, I'm sure whatever you found can be explained. Victor didn't respond right away. Instead he looked back at me. Mrs. Ellis, he said calmly, the document inside that envelope appears to be a sworn statement. He paused. And it mentions unauthorized financial transfers. The words dropped into the room like heavy stones. Lena inhaled sharply. That doesn't prove anything, she said quickly. Victor continued. It also includes account numbers, transaction records, and dates. Lena didn't respond. Which told me everything. Because innocent people argue details. Guilty people go quiet. You see, Victor said gently, I've been in the car business for 27 years. He leaned back slightly in the chair. I've learned something over that time. What's that? I asked. When paperwork looks serious, it usually is. That made sense. Victor was not a lawyer. Not a detective. But he was a businessman. And businessmen recognize risk immediately. So you contacted the police? I asked. Yes, he said. I wasn't accusing anyone of anything. I simply asked if someone could take a look. And they did? Yes. Lena finally exploded again. You had no right to do that. Victor looked calmly at the phone. I bought a vehicle that may have been sold without legal authority, he said. When that happens, it becomes my problem too. He wasn't wrong. If Lena had sold the car illegally, Victor could lose both the money and the vehicle. Which meant protecting himself was simply good business. What did the detective say? I asked. Victor reached into his jacket again. Then he placed another item on the bedside table. A business card. Detective Aaron Patel. Financial Crimes Division. The nurse's eyebrows lifted slightly. Detective Patel reviewed the files on the flash drive, Victor said. My grip on the phone tightened slightly. Because that meant the recordings had already been heard. And those recordings contained something very specific. Not just conversations. Admissions. I didn't listen to the entire thing, Victor added. But the detective did. Lena's voice dropped to a whisper. What recordings? Victor looked back at me again. Like he was giving me the opportunity to explain. But I didn't. Because sometimes the truth hits harder when it comes from someone else. The recordings appear to capture conversations between you and your mother, Victor said. Lena said nothing. The detective heard several discussions involving bank transfers, he continued. Another silence. A long one. Then Lena said the worst possible sentence she could have chosen. That money was temporary. Victor raised one eyebrow. Temporary. That was not denial. That was explanation. And explanations usually come after the truth is already obvious. Temporary how? Victor asked. I was going to pay it back, she said quickly. There it was. Confession hiding inside justification. I just needed time. Victor looked back at me. Mrs. Ellis, he said carefully, did you authorize your daughter to access your bank accounts? No, I replied. The word was simple. But final. Lena immediately jumped in. You left your passwords written down in your office. And that means you can use them? I asked. You're my mother. The logic seemed clear in her mind. Family equals permission. But the law doesn't see things that way. Neither do banks. Neither do detectives. Victor exhaled slowly. I suspected something like this, he said. That's why Detective Patel asked me to bring these documents directly to you. Why? I asked. Because technically, Victor said, the car sale may now be part of the investigation. The nurse shifted uncomfortably beside the wall. She clearly hadn't expected a financial crime discussion in the recovery room. Lena's breathing had become shaky again. What investigation? She asked. Victor looked at the phone again. Detective Patel believes the transfers may qualify as financial exploitation. The phrase echoed heavily in the room. Financial exploitation. Those two words can destroy lives. Not just financially. Legally. Criminally. And Lena knew it. That's ridiculous, she whispered. Victor didn't argue. Instead, he said something even worse. The detective asked me to do one more thing. What? I asked. He asked me to wait here until he arrives. The air left Lena's lungs. You called the police to the hospital, she shouted. Victor shook his head slightly. No. Then he looked at the clock on the wall. He was already on his way. My heart beat once. Slow. Heavy. Because that meant the situation had already crossed a line. This was no longer a private family problem. This was now a legal matter. Footsteps echoed faintly in the hallway outside the room. Calm. Measured. Professional. Victor glanced toward the door. Then back at me. I believe that's him now, he said quietly. And Lena's whispered words came through the phone just as the doorknob began to turn. Oh God, what have I done? What do you do when the truth finally walks through the door? Because that's exactly what happened next. The hospital room was quiet enough that we could all hear the footsteps stop outside. Then the door opened. A man stepped inside wearing a simple dark jacket and carrying a thin case folder. He wasn't dramatic. He wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. Some people walk into a room and the atmosphere changes immediately. This was one of those people. Mrs. Ellis? He asked calmly. Yes. My name is Detective Aaron Patel. His voice was steady, measured, almost reassuring. The kind of voice that comes from years of talking to people during the worst moments of their lives. He glanced briefly at Victor. Mr. Salgado. Victor nodded. Detective. Then Patel's eyes moved to the phone still pressed against my ear. And I assume, he said, your daughter is on the line. Lena froze. For the first time since this entire situation began, she didn't speak. Detective Patel pulled the chair a little closer to the bed and sat down. He placed his folder beside the envelope and flash drive Victor had already set on the table. I'm sorry to visit under these circumstances, he said to me. Especially while you're recovering from surgery. I appreciate you coming, I said quietly. He gave a small nod. Mr. Salgado contacted us this afternoon about a potential issue involving a vehicle sale. Patel's tone wasn't accusatory. It was clinical. Like he was explaining the weather. When we reviewed the documents found in the glove compartment, he continued, we noticed several things that required clarification. I glanced at the phone. Lena was breathing again. But just barely. What things? She asked. Patel didn't rush his answer. Instead he opened the folder and slid a printed sheet onto the table. A bank statement. My bank statement. With several lines highlighted in yellow. These transactions, Patel said, tapping the page gently, total approximately $68,000 over the past 8 months. The number filled the room. Even the nurse gasped quietly behind us. 68,000. That wasn't small. That wasn't accidental. That was systematic. That doesn't prove anything, Lena said quickly. Her voice had regained some of its sharpness. Patel didn't react. He simply turned the page. The recordings on the flash drive appear to contain conversations discussing those transfers. Lena said nothing. Patel continued calmly. In one recording, dated 3 months ago, you mention using your mother's online banking login. Silence. In another recording, he said, you described moving money to cover credit card debt. The quiet inside the room grew heavier. Because once spoken aloud, facts have weight. You can't record someone without permission, Lena said suddenly. Her voice carried a desperate edge now. Patel finally looked toward the phone. In this state, he said evenly, only one party needs to consent to a recording. He paused. Your mother was that consenting party. That was the moment the last argument collapsed. Lena had nowhere left to redirect the conversation. No legal technicality. No clever explanation. Only the truth sitting in front of everyone. But then she tried something else. Desperation often produces creativity. I was going to pay it back, she said. Her voice cracked slightly. It wasn't permanent. Patel leaned back slightly in his chair. That's something we hear quite often in cases like this, he said. But the law doesn't measure intent the same way families do. That sentence hung in the air. Because he was right. Families forgive. The law documents. I finally spoke again. Detective, I said quietly, what happens now? Patel looked at the documents on the table. Then at Victor. Then back at me. Well, he said carefully, the car sale complicates things. Complicates how? I asked. Because if the vehicle was sold without the legal owner's authorization, that could qualify as fraud. Victor nodded slightly. That's why I wanted clarification immediately. Patel acknowledged him with a glance. Understandable. Then he continued. But the larger issue is the financial transfers. Another pause. Those may fall under elder financial exploitation. The phrase felt heavy. Not dramatic. Just serious. How serious? I asked. Patel answered plainly. Potentially felony level. On the phone, Lena whispered something that barely reached my ear. Oh God. She was starting to understand now. This wasn't an argument anymore. It wasn't a family dispute. It was evidence. Recorded. Printed. Organized. Mom, she said quietly. For the first time all night, the anger was gone. Now she sounded small. You wouldn't actually press charges. The room stayed silent. Patel didn't speak. Victor didn't move. Even the nurse held her breath. Because everyone understood something in that moment. The next words mattered. A lot. I looked at the bank statement again. $68,000. 8 months. Small pieces at a time. Enough to hope no one noticed. Then I thought about something else. The months of strange conversations. The subtle lies. The quiet feeling in my stomach that something wasn't right. Lena, I said slowly. Did you think I would never notice? She didn't answer. Instead she whispered something even worse. I thought you wouldn't care. That sentence hit harder than anything else she had said. Because it revealed the real truth behind all of this. Not desperation. Not survival. Assumption. She believed my money was hers to take. And that belief had finally caught up with her. Detective Patel closed his folder slowly. Mrs. Ellis, he said, I'll need to ask you a formal question. I nodded. Go ahead. Do you want to pursue this case? The air in the room felt frozen. Even the machines beside my bed seemed quieter. Because that single answer would decide everything. For Lena. For the investigation. For the future of our relationship. I looked at the phone again. She was still there. Still listening. Still hoping. But what I said next would determine whether this ended as a family tragedy or something far worse.